Welcome back to another episode of the 9 Point Day podcast. This one's a short one. I guess we're calling them 5 point days at this point because they're the shorter version. But again, just like the last couple, shorter episodes, I go through a specific topic and I surveyed previous guests that we've had on the show and kind of get their take on certain things. So far, we've done 5 events for a full games. Like, what's the minimum amount of events, and which ones did you want to see? And the last one was your favorite 10th event, which is always super fun. 10th events are very, very nice. This is kind of like I said top 5. I asked everyone, like, what are your top 5 gym lifts for the Highland Games? Because everyone has like their own idea of like what lifts are best for Highland Games and why. And sometimes those lifts are specifically to like translate to a certain event. Like they work on like deadlifts and like hip snatches or whatever to help their wob or their caber. A lot of people are using like landmine exercises to like mimic kind of like the stones and you can do a lot of rotational work. Pretty much everything we do is very rotational from stones to sheath. Like it's all like twisting your hips and things like that. So everyone's kind of has like their own idea of what they think is like ideal. And this isn't like a desert island. You only have 5 lifts to be the best Highland Games athlete. It's just kind of like what these individual athletes think is beneficial, right? I've got mine, and some of mine just are based on me as an athlete, and like my limitations, right? Like I have a shoulder issue that isn't going away. Like it's been worked on. It's gotten better, but what made it better was kind of just switching up how I do certain lifts, and so that's instead of like so. Okay, I'll go through them. I'll kind of talk through my 5. I put first one's hang snatch. Hang snatch or hip snatch. Very similar to me because I'm not good at snatch. I'm not good at Olympic lifts, so those are kind of interchangeable. Sometimes like when I bend down, like it goes a little bit lower than my hip. Sometimes it just stays on my hip and I snatch up. And that's a very new one for me. I just kind of started doing that in the last couple weeks, couple months. We haven't really had a season to see if like my hip snatch or hang snatch is helping me out. I would even because these are my gym lifts, and I'm talking to you directly, so I have a little bit more to say than just the 5 that I got from the previous guests. So I would even say also like snatches from the hip, snatches from the hang, or snatches from like blocks. They all kind of accomplish a very similar task, right? And that's pulling from from a wob kind of height. Like when you think about weight over bar and how low you get, you're in that power position, and that's kind of like how you start a hang snatch. And caber, when you're going for that pull, you drop down, you're pulling essentially from your hip, from your navel, that area, and you're pulling overhead like a snatch. So like kind of like those two boxes even work just as well too. Like if you kind of have that dead start, dead stop kind of thing, or dead, it'd be a dead start. Like you're not like in that drop down, pull up kind of thing. But I think because hip snatch and hang snatch have that kind of load into it, and then you do the thing, it might actually translate better than something from boxes or pads or whatever. It's an elevated snatch, right? Snatches. That's what we're talking about. The next one is that I put is close grip bench press, and this, gosh, I want more. I see it on all your guys' like YouTubes and Instagrams and things like that. you're doing a lot of military press, a lot of strict presses, which are great. They have their place. But for me, and what I think is more ideal for pretty much all athletes in the Highland Games, is a push press. Push presses are way more dynamic. You can move way more weight, and I think they translate to the throws a lot better than like a static, like, legs locked overhead strict press. Because there are very few. There's nothing we do on the field where we're not incorporating our feet and our hips and our knees and our glutes. We're not there's like every event we're incorporating all those things. So let's do those. There is a time and place that I think is good for like strict presses, military presses, seated presses even. If you don't have like high ceilings and you can't push press, seated press will work in a pinch. And you can even kind of like cheater that up a little bit and help you along the way. That's possible. You can do that. But I think just being able to utilize from toes to fingertips all the way up in one progression is way more useful. Like you look at the stone, like you're pushing from that right foot twisting, you're pushing up off your toes and like you're extending through your fingertips. That's a push press. I've seen Olympic shot putters even do, because like when we're talking stones, we're talking shot put. They're very interchangeable. The only thing that's different is like maybe how you hold it and how you tuck it, because the size is so much different than a shot put. But the training for it specifically is the same thing, right? They're doing kind of like, I want to call them jerks. I don't even know what they're called. They'll be like a quick feet movement plus like a press out. It's not necessarily up. They're not locking out overhead. They're pressing out, and like that's that stone finish, right? Like it's that similar process as a push press that like we're going from toes to fingertips. I think that is absolutely useful, and I want to see more guys, especially in the amateur ranks, doing push presses, and find that time of year when military presses are acceptable. Because in my mind, a strict press is useful in the off season. I don't do them personally. I don't like them. I like to stay moving as dynamic as I can, even when I'm doing more bodybuilding, hypertrophy kind of thing. That being said, I've done them in the past, and they have helped build up my push press because you're building your delts. You're getting monstrous, so it's a thing to do, right? So the next one is going to be close grip bench press. This is one of those ones that I've kind of changed. A lot of people just like you could say like the big five, right, are your ideal Highland Games like lists, right? You've got your squat, bench, deadlift, clean, and snatch. Those are like the big five. That's like your super total, and that'll get you by. So like my first thought when I'm coming up with these is like, oh, bench press. But I'm like, yeah, I don't really do bench press like I used to. Okay, because what I used to do was, that wide grip, powerlifting style bench press. But that's hurting my shoulder. Like that much load on like week after week plus throwing, like everything from catching snatches to like throwing stones and throwing weights, especially sheath. Like when I start position on sheath, like my right hand is fully extended behind me, and that's a lot of like pressure on my shoulder, and then I have to drive from that kind of compromised position. And so it's really screwing my shoulder, and it was really affecting my bench press. Like I was like really kind of skittish. So what I started doing was like a shoulder saver pad. Now we're kind of moving away from like a main lift to like an accessory type lift when you start adding in shoulder saver pads, bench blocks, Mark Bell slingshots, things like that. So I started moving away towards that, and I started moving my grip in a whole lot closer. My grip now for bench press is what a lot of powerlifters would call close grip. I think it's a little wide because my close grip I think is actually pretty narrow, pretty like very, very narrow, like thumbs almost touching, kind of like narrow. I don't go that narrow when I go heavy. It's a little bit out wide, but I'm not having to flare my shoulders out. And when I'm as deep as I can get with the shoulders air pad, it's taking all that pressure off my shoulder, and I can actually bench press good. Um, that's another thing about throwing and training as a thrower is the fact that like you don't have to do the lift like a power lifter, like an Olympic lifter. You're here to throw, you're not here to lift. Lifting gets you to throw further. Throwing does not help your lifting get better, right? So think of it as a thrower who lifts, not a lifter who throws. We've all kind of heard that a bunch, and I was kind of reiterating that point. And so close grip bench press, I think it's really good it does work your pecs, but some would say that's more of a tricep exercise. But with like where I'm kind of at with it, I still get a nasty like chest pump when I'm going for like the hypertrophy, that volume type stuff. But I do also feel it in my triceps, and that is very good for your stones. Like that's the extension, that's that finish, that's that last little extension of your arm to like make it happen. And that's triceps. Close grip bench press gets you there. Then we got safety squat bar squats. Um, I don't know why. I don't know why it's called a safety squat bar. Maybe it's because like you can be hands free and like I don't know. I don't know why it's called that. But that's what it's called, and that's what I like. The reason for this is because again, this goes back to we don't have to do as throwers. We don't have to do the lift exactly how like a power lifter would do it. The guys who are moving the most amount of weight aren't necessarily the best throwers, right? You modify things to work for you to help you out. When my shoulder was being really wonky, kind of getting back in that, even in a high bar position, was kind of pulling my shoulders in a way I didn't really like. But like wasn't too bad. I can kind of get around that. The real issue was when I was low bar squatting for years. I was low bar squatting, which is debatable whether or not as a thrower you should be doing high bar squats or low bar squats. I'm kind of leaning towards now these days, if you were to use a straight bar, high bar squats probably are better. Mostly because like that's like your finish position. Like when you're going through like a stone throw and like a weight throw, you're very vertical. Your torso is very vertical. You're not like leaning over. You shouldn't be leaning over too much as you go through it. But things happen, right? The issue I was having when I was low bar squatting for those years, I would get really bad tendonitis in like both of my like forearms and like bicep tendon, and that was affecting my bench. It was affecting a lot of things, and I was found that it was like it wasn't because of my bench grip or whatever. It was purely because of low bar squats, and I was like, I need to invest in a new bar, kind of work around this, and being a like garage gym owner, user, CEO of my own garage gym. I want new equipment. Everyone does, right? So like next thing on the list, safety squat bar, because that way I don't have to deal with that bicep tendonitis issue. Because if anyone had bicep tendonitis or the tendonitis in general, like your grip kind of like you lose your grip. You can't squeeze like you want to. It's a real chore and it kind of hurts when you have to do it. And so like that sucks for like almost all the events where we need a grip, right? And another benefit of having a safety squat bar is like doing good mornings with a safety squat bar is so much nicer than doing it with like a straight bar. Even if you're doing like single leg squats and things like that, they're nice to have because if you get stuck with like your leg propped up on something in a deep like single leg squat, you can reach out and grab that rack and like pull yourself up, and you can't do that the regular straight bar. You could dump it, but it gets really sketchy real quick. So safety squat bars are legit for that. But I like them a lot because they put me in a better position, a more athletic position. The way it loads, I'm able to be hands free if I need to for God knows what reason. But I think it's useful, and I think more people should utilize those. And the last one, this is possibly my favorite. I didn't put a specific one on here, but it's just box jumps in general. Um, I didn't put a specific one because I rotate them. I go seated box jump to landing with a straight leg, seated box jump to landing like with knees to chin, right? Like that deep, like I'm catching it as high as I can, um, kind of jump. Which again, some will argue. Well, like a lot of these things that I like to do are it's different. It's different for everyone, and that's perfectly acceptable. That's totally fine. But like some like or I'll do I say box jump. It's really just jumps, right? Any kind of plyometrics to help you be explosive time and time again. So bounds, box jumps for like not high reps. We're talking about like because we're not building cardio here. We're building explosive power output. I think are very useful. And you can do a lot of things with just a 12-inch box. Like there's a lot of things. You don't have to get a 42-inch box and try to like show off for your friends on the internet, though it can be cool sometimes. But so those are my five. So we got snatch variants from like a hang, a hip, whatever. Close grip bench press, push press, safety squat bar, and safety squat bar squats, specifically squats, um, or in box jumps or jumps in general. Those are like key things. You do like these things plus your like your main, your squat, bench, deadlift, snatch, clean, things like that. If you do all those, um, you're good to go. Like that's how you can do the Highland Games very well. Um, then we got Danny Autry up next. I talked to him and he gave me his. He said squat, bench, overhead press, like a hang, clean, or snatch, and lots of carries, which is those are good. And he kind of prefaced it with like he grew up watching World's Strongest Man and all that kind of stuff. So like being a big meathead strong guy is where it's at. So his first two that he listed were squat and deadlift. And like those are like big dog lifts, right? If you're pulling 700 pounds, like that's a good deadlift. And like everyone aspires to do that. There's that discussion of is this 700-pound deadlift beneficial for me as a thrower? And some say yes, some say no. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If it works for you, if being like peak strong is making you throw further, then that's it. And some guys find that like oh, I don't need to have like the peak strength. I need to throw very well. I need to throw more technical. A lot of smaller guys get away with this. A lot of lightweights get away with not being the big squatters, the big deadlifters, the big bench pressers, but they throw very well relative to weight. But yeah, and then overhead presses. Again, like he didn't specify push press, but there's variants to all of this, whether it be standard like standing military strict press or push press. But like putting weight overhead is key. We've talked about this earlier. Hang clean, hang snatch. That's kind of like that's a common occurrence for a lot of these. Is just starting at that hang or hip or hinged position, right? And then carries, which the carries are very interesting because Danny's a disciple of the John Oden school of Highland Games. We'll do John Oden next, but John is big into carries. He like we talked about it on the episode where the 10th event. He's like he wants a carry even for the 10th event. Like he thinks that's very useful, and I don't disagree. I think doing carries is very useful, whether it be a big sandbag or like suitcase carries, like off weight like suitcase carries where like you got something in each hand and like one's way heavier than the other, but like it, and like being like really strict with like single arm like lifts. It's very there are a lot of aspects to that can be very useful. The hard part for me that I think with carries is like when are you implementing this into the year that makes it a useful lift. And that's something that like John as a coach can work with you and like find out like where that fits best in your season, in your off season, and things like that. But let's go with John now. John put a front squat, kettlebell swings, push press, trap bar deads, and suitcase carries. Yeah. And so again, start front squat. A squat is mandatory. Whether you're doing a safety squat bar, low bar, high bar, front squat, like a squat is mandatory. I think that is, it's some argue it's the king of lifts. Like if you can do one lift forever to the day you die, some say squat's the one to do. Some say deadlift's the one to do. But they are all the squat is the king of lift for a reason. In front squat, just like I mentioned before, um, versus like low bar versus high bar. For those who don't know, low bar is where you kind of put it on your traps and on your shoulders. Like the bar's up high, you have a more vertical torso angle when you get down to the bottom, right? And low bar is where it sits kind of like on your upper back, on like on your shoulder blades, on like your middle of your traps. That's low bar. And when you get down to the bottom, you're more at like a steeper angle. Utilize more lower back when standing up with it. I think for all around strength, if you're trying to be the strongest person you can be, low bar is the way to go. But we're throwers, so we utilize the squat in a different way. And that another benefit of front squat for a thrower is just the fact that both of our stones are thrown from here, damn near that front rack position. I mean, front rack's a little bit out, but like you're here, right? And so like everything you do is in that vertical torso, hands up and kind of up front. You're not holding it behind you or anything like that. Very high bar squat and front squats are like athletic kind of movements. That's the one you want to do, right? Kettlebell swings. This is like again very John Oden. Like I knew he's gonna put kettlebell swings on here because he's a strong first kind of guy, and they utilize kettlebells. That's like their main programming thing. Kettlebell swings are very useful. But again, for me, like John's on another wavelength of like training. He's galaxy brain when it comes to a lot of this stuff. He picks apart little pieces of things and understands it better than most, better than me for sure. So I normally wouldn't put a kettlebell swings on there. I've never really done a kettlebell swing as like a workout, so I don't know too much about it. But I know he does, and he sees benefit in it, and I trust this guy. But he put push press on there. That's the next one because push press is the best. It just like we talked about before. Always got to put it on. Like I put it into every programming block that I have. Then he has trap bar deadlifts. You call them trap bars, you call them hex bars, whatever. Those are really good. Just like, especially if you own like a home gym, that's a bar that I think everyone should have, just like a safety squat bar, because they're very useful. Pulling from a high-handled trap bar gets you in a good athletic position, vertical torso. You're not really compromised with a rounded back if you're being aware of how you deadlift. And you can load them up just as heavy as you can with a straight bar, if not heavier. My trap bar personally is actually, with the bumpers that I have, it's too small to load up. I'm too strong for my trap bar. I need to get a bigger one. I got the cheapest one that was on, I think, Elite FTS at the time, but it works. What I use it for mostly now is like trap bar jumps. That's the lift that I do a lot, but I didn't put it on my list because I don't think it's mandatory. Just like I don't think deadlifts are necessarily mandatory for the Highland Games. But he put trap bar deads on there, and I think that's a really smart idea. And then he goes to suitcase carry. We talked about before, him and Danny they're big carry guys. They're useful when you program them correctly at the right time of year for the right purpose and understanding what that purpose is. And we talked about it on the episode with him that like doing a suitcase carry and being really strict with it, like they're not like swaying all around, like you're being very like tight and controlled, and like you do it for like it's a mental game, man. Like your grip wants to go, you want to give up on it, your body wants to cave in, but you fight it, and like there's like a mental fortitude aspect to it that you don't get with like a lot of other lifts because you have a marker that you're trying to walk to and carry this thing. You got to carry that thing back because it's got to go back. You got to put it up. Like it's a tough thing to do, and they're very awesome. Let's go to Emily Adams now. For those who don't know, she is one of the best sheep throwers of all time. She's an incredible athlete. She put deadlift, squat, power snatch, bench and push press. Bench and push press, discussed it before, they're good to go. Deadlift, she didn't specify what kind of deadlift. We talked about it with her in the episode. I asked her, or like, are you using a trap bar? And she's like, no, straight bar, which you don't see a lot of. You don't see a lot of Highland Games athletes using a straight bar, but she's dummy strong, and so it's got to work. It works for her. Power snatches, whether you're pulling from the floor. This is a thing that I've discussed with a lot of people about snatches and cleans specifically. The catching in a power, for those who don't know, like you can look it up, the difference between like a full snatch and like a power snatch. And some will argue like there's no full snatch, it's just snatch and then there's powers, right? The full snatch is where you're like, when you catch overhead, like your ass to grass, like your butt's touching, like damn near touching the ground, you're catching it at the bottom. Powers are when like you're essentially pulling a little bit higher than you would for a full, and you're not squatting down with it to get underneath it. You're catching it up really high. And I've talked with other people about this, and they say that in the Highland Games, no event are we catching it in the hole. Our butt is not on the ground on any event. We're finishing as tall as we possibly can. So whether you're doing like tall snatches or muscle snatches or things like that, you're being very vertical with it. Everything we're trying to do, especially like with like caber, wob, and sheaf, like it's all being as tall as possible. So finding yourself in the hole is not ideal. So that's where like power snatch really come into play, is like you're catching as high as you can, right? And that's useful, right? Let's go to Brother Josh McIntosh of No Fan Games. I wanted to pick his brain on this, so I asked him, and he gave me high pulls, hang cleans, hang snatch, close grip bench, and like landmine work. He didn't specify landmine presses or like landmine, like rotational landmine work, but either way, like they are all anything with a landmine, when loaded correctly and with the like right technique, because like they can be very, very useful for throwing events, because you're doing a lot, you're being rotational with it, you're pushing through, you're pushing tall, and that's a throw, right? We get that. High pulls, hang cleans, and like hang snatches, just like we said before, they're good to go. High pulls are this, like he's the only one who put high pull on there, which is they're a very smart lift, because you could do like a clean grip and like pull it up to your eyes, right? And that's damn near like everything that the event is, whether it be like caber, sheaf, wob, things like that. You're pulling high, and you don't need that technical skill to catch it in your shoulders. Some will say that the high pulls are all you need for the Highland Games, and I have a hard time arguing against that. I think that might be mostly true, that just doing snatch high pulls or clean high pulls are good enough. But being a gym rat and mastering lifts and like being the like being proficiently skilled in like specific lifts, I think there's something to be said for learning this a full snatch, full clean. I think that's useful. That's a useful skill to have, and it will only help your high pulls, which will help your throws. There is some more to be said on like catching a clean or catching a snatch in like that stretch reflex, that compression of the weight on you. Like there's metrics. If you look at like Verkhoshansky, I think he wrote some stuff on it about how like there's benefit to catching for lifts, and a lot of his work is with like Soviets and Soviet weightlifters and things like that. So take that with what you will. There could be a benefit to catching the cleans and catching the snatches, but generally speaking, for a Highland Games athlete, you don't have to learn the skill of the snatch clean. You can just pull it up as high as you can. I say you pull up to your nipples, and that's as high as you need to go, and that's good. That's that's good. That's pretty much there. Other guys will tell you, pull it up to your eyeballs, whatever that load looks like, pull it up as high as you can. Perfect. The last one we got on here is Haley Gow. Power cleans, deadlifts, landmines, a landmine press, and med ball rotational throws, and a snatch. So we got the snatch, we got the power clean, like we discussed before, fulls and powers. Deadlift, which again, like, isn't necessary. She said deadlift. She didn't specify trap bar deadlift. Useful, but for me, not always the most useful. Landmine press, just like with brother Josh. Yeah, that landmines are very cool. You can load them in a million different ways. There's a lot of different ways to. You can do landmine rows, landmine presses, like landmine swings. You can do a lot of different things with landmine. And another thing that is oh man, it's very good for, like, I think late off season into going into the early preseason, early season of the Highland Games is med ball rotational throws. Find a med ball that is a reasonable weight for your size and age, and like throw that fucker from the hip. Just blast that thing out like that is, and twist your hips through. You can even use rotational med ball throws as part of a drill for your Braemar stone, for your open stone. Like those are very useful tools that, like, I think a lot of people don't use them because a lot of gyms they go to don't have a wide array of med balls, and not a lot of places you can throw them. I know Danny Autry, his gym has just thick bomb-proof like plywood on the walls that you can throw anything at, unless you throw it through the wall, which I'm pretty sure he's done, but not with a med ball. But I use med balls. I don't throw them like a lot of people do, because a lot of people throw them at a wall and they can catch them back and do it over again. I don't have any good walls to do that on. I can find a tree, I guess, and be like, go real full John Oden on it and just be out in the woods hucking med balls. Or what I normally do, I use it as a tool to kind of prime myself pre-practice, and I throw them out in the field to do that rotational work out in the field. But that's the list. That's what we got. That's what we got from the previous guest. A lot of rant about me and how I do things. No one's perfect when it comes to training for the Highland Games. We've got hundreds of years of Highland Games athletes who've competed, but we don't have the. We utilize a lot of stuff from real sports. It's track and field, like shot put, discus, hammer, like javelin. We utilize a lot of what they do for their power development and their training. So we're doing a lot of similar stuff, but we're adapting it for the Highland Games. And so because of that, not everyone's idea of their 5 perfect lifts or their, like, what they think works is generally what works for them or what they found works for them. That doesn't mean it's going to work for you. What I do may not work for you. But there's kind of like a jumping off point, something to like get you going. If you do your own programming, and I recommend everyone do their own programming. That being said, there are a lot of great coaches out there who can do it for you. Like we've had John Oden on, and he's a coach, and he will program the shit out of a lot of different things for you and get you right on track. Tom Soroka, another great coach who emphasizes a lot of Olympic lifting in his coaching, and none of these guys are wrong. They have different different ideologies and or methodologies, but they will get you to a common goal, and that's to throw better. But I think for me, I've only ever programmed for myself in the gym, and not being an expert, not having a degree in kinesiology and exercise science, stuff like that. I'm using a lot of information. I have to read a lot of stuff. I have to learn a lot of stuff. But I'm always learning. And just like the 2 coaches I mentioned, like, they're always learning as well. Nothing is ever set in stone, because we're always getting better. We always have find things that work differently, especially as you age. Like, you never know. Like, I might find one day that my favorite lift, like the push press, just isn't really clicking for me. It's not really translating out to the field. but it is what it is. Um, I want to see what your guys is, top 5 gym list for Highland Games. What are you guys doing that you think is like benefiting you out in the field? Give me specifics. I want to see them. And that's it. So please comment, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. It really helps the algorithm. I want more people to see this. Like, I do this because I want the games to grow. I want every brilliant. I've talked about this in previous episodes. Every brilliant idea someone has for the Highland Games always falls flat because of population. We don't have the 10,000 extra athletes in the United States to be what we like think we want to be. Maybe this is as big as we're going to get. Maybe we're peaking. Who knows? I don't want to see that. I want to see us grow. I want to see us continue. So please share it to your friends. Talk about it. Do whatever. But that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. As always, throw far. God bless.